Well, hello friend, and welcome to another episode of Van Life Living in New York. I'll tell you, I just went and got my hair cut. If you haven't noticed from the last video, all of a sudden I've got short hair. Well, the hairstylist is always trying to make conversation with the people that are cutting their hair, so she started asking me questions, and well, she was kind of intrigued by the answers, I think. Because, I mentioned about going, and I go out in the woods and do videos about Jesus, and well, she started asking me, I don't think she has much, she's fond of religion, friend. Because she was like, oh, well, why are you getting your hair cut? Jesus had long hair. I said, oh, I'm not Jesus, I talk about Jesus. I said, if you knew me, you'd know, it would be clear that I wasn't Jesus. Right, and I testified a little bit about how Jesus got me out of hell, and that I was a person that suffered addiction and all kinds of stuff, and that's why I'm always on here talking about this Jesus. That was my commitment to my Father, right? Because I'll tell you the truth, I didn't really believe in Jesus in the beginning, and I kind of believed in God, but kind of didn't, and Jesus intrigued me. And that's the reason I got to know Jesus, because he said some things that were very intriguing to me, and the fact that he told everybody he was going to get killed and then he went and did it. And I mean, it was clear that he set himself up, right? This wasn't an accident that he went and got murdered. I mean, he could have got out of it at any time, and he kept doing things to get murdered. And there's enough proof of that whether you're an atheist or an agnostic, it doesn't matter. If there's a video that I watched one time called, The Case for Christ. There was a professional, he was a newspaper reporter or something or other, and his wife became Christian, and he went about trying to disprove Jesus, right? And in the end, now he's Christian, because while he was digging up all the stuff to prove that it wasn't true, it actually proved to him it was. Kind of like what happened to me, friend. I didn't just happen across doing what Jesus asked. I was doing it out of desperation. But I've done a lot of watching videos about how there's proof of no Jesus, right? That Jesus didn't exist, or he wasn't the Son of God, and all of that stuff. Well, he is the Son of God, but so are you, and so am I. So let's clear that up, and Jesus told you that. So don't you listen to that church telling you things that aren't true. Because Jesus said that ye are gods, and because it was written into Scripture, it can't be undone. I don't care which way you cut this cake, friend. Anybody that says anything other than that, they're wiggling half a tongue. Satan has a forked tongue like a snake, and he wiggles half a tongue, and these churches are wiggling half tongues on you, friend. So I'm not here to tell you the truth the church told you, because religion has no meaning to me whatsoever. I don't go to church. I tried to go to a lot of different churches, and I found a lot of half-tongue wigglers wiggling half of this and half of that. And I'll tell you, friend, I get a lot of people on here that will try to tell me that I'm wrong for saying what I'm saying, that are from churches. And you know how I know the things that they really don't know Jesus? Because the people that really go to church, they get taught to memorize things, right? So they will have the verses and everything, exactly where to find the words that they're telling me, right? So what that tells me, if you don't know, that tells me that somebody taught them to memorize specific verses so that they would see things from the same point of view as the people teaching them. That's why I don't listen to the men that get degrees from men that got degrees from men. They're all teaching each other a bunch of lies instead of the truth. Jesus was the truth. So if you want to know the truth, you go get a red letter edition of the Bible and read what Jesus said and read, and believe that every word's true, and don't believe them talking about how Jesus didn't mean what he said. That's BS, friend, and I'm telling you so. Jesus said that at the end of the age, that by your words you would be acquitted, and by your words you would be condemned. If Jesus said it, it's true, friend. He said that if you do not forgive, you will not be forgiven. If Jesus said it, friend, it's true. So don't believe all this, if you believe Jesus died on the cross for you, you just get this free kingdom in your death. That is not what Jesus said, and anybody that goes and reads what he says will be clear that that is not what he said. But what happens is, I listen to him all the time saying, oh, well, he wasn't talking to us, he was talking to the disciples, or he was talking to this person or that person. Of course he wasn't talking to us, friend. We weren't here 2,000 years ago. Or were we? Right? They don't even look at anything, friend. They go by the stuff that they've been taught. And if you go look at what Jesus said about John the Baptist, he said that he was Elijah returned multiple times in multiple things, and everybody will still deny that. Friend, they're calling Jesus a liar. So if you want to call Jesus a liar, you don't want to listen to me, because I'm going to tell you what Jesus said. So John the Baptist got out alive, but he came back and had his head cut off as John the Baptist, which makes absolute sense, friend, because right in the Bible it says that nobody gets out of here without giving one death. So Elijah got out without giving his death because he had to come back and have his head taken as John the Baptist. So the Bible still holds true, because Elijah died just as John the Baptist instead of as Elijah. Because it said that we all have to give one death, right? Now the Bible didn't say that we had to give two. So he gave the required death that my father needed, right? So you don't understand a lot of what's going on in that Bible, and neither do the church, because they're not listening to things being said. Because when you're talking about that, let's bring up another statement Jesus said. Jesus said that before me the kingdom suffered violence, was taken by force, but after me it won't. Then he said, he went as far as saying that because he came, that those that already had a seat at the table that entered through violence were going to be cast back out and have to enter rightly. Is he the truth? Or did he lie? And if so, I can't trust the darn thing he said, right? So now that has to be true. So what he's telling you is that there's a whole lot more to going on than what it is you're seeing. And he told you that he was going to utter secrets that had been hidden since the foundation of the world. And he did. Because if you also go and look at the church to Philadelphia in red, where Jesus was talking to John in the church to Philadelphia, it says that he that overcomes, he will make a pillar in the temple of my God, and he will go out no more. What does no more mean, friend? That means you've been going out, right? So, and if you go get different Bibles, you'll get different words in different ways, but they come out saying about the same thing. Because I've looked in multiple Bibles to see how that mapped out in different Bibles, and they all still come out saying not leaving again or no more. So understand that one statement. If that's not true, then neither's anything in Revelation or the Bible, right? So if that statement is true, well then that means you've got more than one life, don't you? You see, these preachers are preaching from people that were trying to control the population. So they use religion as population control. That's what Constantine was doing with Christianity when he converted, because Christianity was ruining his religion. He hitched a ride on Christianity because he needed to control the people with religion. So he did that. And then he went and changed up all the laws and all the things when he took over the church, right? Because if you go look at that, it was Constantine that caused the Council of Laodicea, right? He locked them all in there and said, you have to work this out. So not everybody had the same belief systems, but he forced them into making a general consensus so that he could use it to rule his people. And then, of course, what ends up happening, the Pope becomes the leader of Rome, right? So he just hitched a ride. He just switched one throne to the next throne. And then ever since then, they've said they have the right to change God's laws. They changed Saturday Sabbath to Sunday Sabbath, even though the Old Testament says that the Saturday Sabbath is a commitment between God and his people forever, forever. And Jesus said that he didn't come to remove not one jot or tittle, not one stroke of the pen from the law, right? So, and everybody wants to justify that that's not the case. But you can know that that's going to be true, friend, because if you look in Revelation, it talked about that my Father was going to mark all his children on the forehead, right? On the frontlets between their eyes. And that's going to be Saturday Sabbath. So going into tribulation, you will wear my Father's seal and you will abide in the Ten Commandments as written, or you won't. But if you don't, then you're not marked as my Father's son and or daughter, and you're going to have to do what you've got to do, friend. But if, there's all kinds of people telling you this, and people don't want to believe that because they want to believe God is love, and God is love. But understand it is, my Father would not judge his children, but the Son will, because the Son is the King. And so the Son's going to do it so the Father doesn't have to, right? Because if you recall correctly, it's Jesus that breaks the seals on the scroll, right? So it's not my Father judging his children. It's Christ, your brother, is going to judge us for him. And the first rider rides against the church, right? You understand that. Because the rider's coming to judge the church because the church wouldn't judge itself. Jesus told you you had no right to judge anyone except the church. And the church has judged everyone except for themselves. You have all these Pharisees standing on the steps of the temple everywhere going, woe to the gay people, woe to the homeless people, woe to the drug addicts. Friend, that's exactly what they were doing to the tax collector, and Jesus said that you'd be far better to be like the tax collector that wouldn't even look up at my Father going, I'm unworthy, right? So why would you judge anybody? So I'm not judging the Pharisees for doing it. But I have to tell you that he was talking about Christian Pharisees as much as he was the Jewish Pharisees. And here at the end of the age, you're going to owe twice the debt if you're doing that, just as Jesus said you would. And I know that the church told you that you were going to get this free kingdom in your death if you just said you believe Jesus died on the cross for you. But listen to this parable, friend, that he talked about. He talked about the end of the age when his bride wakes up, right? So because he said when his brides wake up means they fell asleep. So they were sleeping and they have to awaken. When they awaken, they're going to discover they don't have enough oil for their lamp. That is love, faith, and a relationship with my Father through the Holy Spirit. And because they don't have what they need, they're going to go to their fellow servants, the ones that are actually doing what they were supposed to, and they're going to say, give me your oil. Which means they're going to go to the people that are at the homeless shelters or at the soup kitchens and out there helping people. And they're going to say, hey, give me a spot helping you help these people. And they're going to say, friend, go get your own oil because there's not going to be any spots left, right? And so they're not going to give up their spot so that you can have it because Jesus told them not to take their hand off the plow, right? You're getting all this, right? So he said by the time they go to the store to get oil, that some of them won't make it into the wedding. By the time they get to the wedding, the wedding door will be closed. Noah's ark, the door to the ark closed a week in advance. You get that, right? 7 days in advance. So, and it talks about that, and now you can assume that if tribulation 7 years versus 7 days, that somewhere at the beginning of tribulation, the door to the wedding closes, and those that are in the ark remain in the ark, and those that aren't will not. And I can't tell you when the tribulation starts, friend. I can tell you it's getting close. My Father won't show me the exact day. I know a lot of things, but I still know nothing at all because the only thing I know is what my Father knows for me. And he shows me certain things. And sometimes I know things and then I forget them, and then he'll remind me again later or something. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, friend. I don't do this. My Father does it for me. And you won't believe that, and I don't expect you to. Right? You'll call me crazy like everybody else does. That lady was kind of making fun of me that was cutting my hair, right? She was, because I talked about moving out of a 3-bedroom house into a box truck that so I moved into it, and she's like, yeah, living in the van down by the river. Like that Chris Farley from Saturday Night Live or whatever it was. So anyway, and I was laughing with her because people already make fun of me about that, right? So trust me, I think I talk to God and everybody else thinks I'm plumb nuts, and I just really don't care, friend. Understand that my Father gives me miracles. I went and got a haircut because God gave me money, right? I don't have a job, but he takes care of me in these little miraculous ways. And so, it's not like I'm starving to death because I'm fat, right? I mean, my Father takes care of me in all these different ways. And you'll say that that's not God. It's coincidence that everything just works out perfectly in my life to keep me on this path with God. But that's okay too, because I'm not here to impress you, right? Because I just do what I do because it's my job. Jesus said, why do you want credit for what you do? It's your job. This is my job, is to talk about what Jesus said and to call everyone out on what Jesus said rather than what religion is saying Jesus said. Because here's the case, friend. I'm not really here to talk Christians anymore. I've tried to talk to Christian after Christian, and nobody wants to listen to a word because they are so convinced that these Pharisees have it all right. So I'm here to talk to anybody that'll listen, just as my Father told me to, right? He told you that the messenger was going to come, talk to the Christians, and the Christians wouldn't listen to him because they were too busy out buying bigger houses, buying newer cars, newer farm tractors. They were buying fancier purses, busy getting married. He told you at the end that everybody was going to be still being given in marriage and babies still being born. I mean, you all see where this is going, friend. Our children are getting butchered in their schools, and you all are still producing kids like, oh, no big deal. Revelation ain't going to happen. Well, friend, I hate to break news to you, but you're wrong about that. Because he told you that we were going to call what is good evil and what is evil good. And we are doing exactly that. Now, I'm not going to go into which things that is because I'm not here to judge anyone, right? So it doesn't matter to me, because if you don't believe in God and you don't believe in Jesus, why do I think you would follow some moral law that God asked us to follow, right? So I'm not upset that the atheists aren't following God's laws because they don't even believe that there's a God. So how can they follow laws if they don't believe there's a God? However, atheist or not, you will pay a debt at the end of the age. It's just Christians will owe twice the debt, just as Jesus said. So it is what it is. So I hope you all are keeping that in mind here at this hour. But the purpose of the world is to come to know love by experience. That's what the purpose is. That's the reason he told you that he was going to deny his own disciples at the end of the age. And he said that they were going to say, but Lord, I prayed and prophesied and cast out demons in your name. And he said, I don't know you. I was hungry. You didn't feed me. I was naked. You didn't clothe me. I was sick and in prison and you didn't visit me. And they said, but Lord, when did I see you hungry, naked, sick, and in prison? He said, what you did the least to my brother, you did unto me. Well, friend, there's all kinds of people on this planet that are hungry, naked, and sick, and in prison. And if you're not doing anything to help them, then you are not bearing fruit. And therefore, my Father's going to cut your dead limb off. That's what Jesus said, right? Because Jesus said that he was the vine, we were the branches, and that the Father was the gardener. And that those limbs that were fruitful, the Father would prune and make even more fruitful. But at the end of the age, he was going, the unfruitful limbs, meaning the dead limbs, he was going to cut off, gather up, and throw into the fire, right? But he said this in parable after parable. He told you that the seed was going to fall amongst brambles and shallow soil on the path. Only few of them fell in fertile soil, friend. It said many would be called, but few would be chosen. So just because you're going to church once a week and you're not doing anything, and if you're thinking 10% of your income was valid, you didn't understand what Jesus was saying to the Pharisees, because they were giving 10% of their cumin and spice and abiding in like 613 laws, friend. And he called them sons of Satan, meaning sons of selfishness. And they love those that love him, just like Christians do, right? Jesus said, loving those who love you, that's easy. Even the sinners and tax collectors do that. What credit is that to you? You've got to love them all, friend. You've got to forgive them all. When he was talking about that parable about the master forgiving the servant his debt, he was going to sell his family and everybody into slavery to pay the debt, and he begged the master for forgiveness. Well, that was Jesus and you. So when you beg for forgiveness and he gave it to you, if you go back out and judge people and hold them accountable, well, guess what? you're going to end up back in front of him, and he's going to throw you into prison, and you're going to pay all that's due, right? And he told you that if you believed in him and said that you believed in Jesus, that what you would owe would be twice the debt as anyone else. I'm saying these things so clearly because I don't want you to be caught, if you're a Christian, listening to these Pharisees telling you half-truths. I don't care if you believe me or not. Just get a red letter edition. You can call me a liar, friend. I don't even want to be right. But I've seen my Father in the beginning, and I know why he does all this. And he showed it to me because there's no other way for me to have courage enough to do what he's asking of me, because I've been a coward from the beginning and I'll be a coward at the end. And the only reason I do this is because my Father gives me strength when I've got none. Because if you haven't figured it out, because all the things I'm saying, somebody's wanting to kill me thinking they're doing God a favor, just like they did Jesus. His Pharisees handed him over to Rome. Do you think my Pharisees won't hand me over to Rome? Come on. And you understand that a publicly traded corporation is the thought of Satan made flesh, and so therefore, who will they hand me over to? The corporations. No, the law won't do it, not legally. They can't crucify me legally, can they? However, they can do all kind of stuff behind your back, just like they do behind all of our backs right now. I mean, you do realize that we have a prison in Guantanamo Bay where we hold people without a trial because it's not on American soil, right? So you know that we're just like Rome. Except for Rome had the decency not to be able to throw their own, hold people without a trial that were the citizens of Rome. Now in America they can, because all they have to do is declare that you're a terrorist. And then they can go hold you. I mean, I just watched, friend, not too long ago, 2 guys get out of there that had been held for 20 years without a trial. 20 years down there. Can you imagine the hell they went through for 20 years? And they don't even know if they're guilty. And you know they weren't guilty or they'd never let them out, right? So imagine having somebody make an accusation against you and throw you in prison for 20 years in a free nation. One that says it's equal with all other nations. No, friend. Otherwise, it would be on our soil and we give them a trial just like we're supposed to give our own citizens. Friend, this country is far more like Rome than you can even imagine. And my Father left you until you could see the truth. But Donald Trump stood in my Father's house in a church in Florida, and he was bragging about killing that terrorist over there in the Middle East somewhere in this church. And then everybody cheered him on. And out of his pride, he said, it was God's will. So understand, Donald Trump stood in my Father's house and declared God's will murder. Jesus said that offenses must come, but woe to those who bring them. He said, before me the kingdom suffered violence and was taken by force, but after me it won't. Then Donald Trump, on camera, again, somewhere else on this interview, he was outside. These are things I've seen with my own eyes, friend. And they asked Donald Trump if he asked for forgiveness. You know, because he's always talking about Jesus, you know, that he's this good Christian, right? So they asked him if he asked for forgiveness. And Donald Trump told him that he doesn't ask for forgiveness because he never does anything wrong. So he said he's the second coming of Christ because he's perfect. Because he doesn't need to ask for forgiveness. Friend, any Christian who follows him does not know Jesus at all. So if you're a Christian and you're a Trump fan, I'm sure hoping you're going to go read some Jesus, because Trump is not, if he's your savior, then he might save you, but Christ ain't. Because Christ told you the truth, friend. He said that we have to turn the other cheek, we have to forgive if we want forgiven, we have to love, better to give than receive. I mean, this just goes on, friend, of what Jesus said. So I'm hoping you're going to go read what Jesus said. And I don't want to talk about this stuff because there's plenty of Christians out there that'll kill you quicker than anything because they think they're self-righteous because they believe Jesus died on the cross for them and they think they're getting a free trip to the kingdom. Those are the most dangerous Christians and the ones most likely to kill me. And most of them are Trump followers. So don't think I like talking about the truth about what Trump said, but my Father doesn't give me that choice. I don't get to choose what I talk about. I talk to my Father before I turn this camera on. I said, Father, speak for me. He said, I always do. You know I will. And now I speak. I don't write anything down. I never know what I'm going to say until I do. I knew I was going to start off talking about the haircut lady because that's what me and him were talking about. And then I just speak from the Spirit like Jesus tells me to. So, and you guys are my judges. And however you judge me is the way I get judged, friend. But it doesn't matter because Jesus said that your thought of Satan, meaning your thought of selfishness, can steal my flesh. But only my thought of Satan, which is my thought of selfishness, can steal my spirit. So as long as I abide in the Spirit of Christ and I do what He asked and I speak the truth that He's given me, well then I'm in Him and He's in me. And because I'm in Him and He's in me, I'm in my Father and my Father's in me. So therefore I speak on behalf of the Father and the Son. Now you can't know that and I don't expect you to believe it. But I speak on behalf of the Son so that my Father remains blameless, right? Because that's the reason Jesus breaks the seal, so that my Father remains blameless. You all know that my Father's been blameless from the beginning, and He'll stay that way till the end. That's why He created this thought of Satan. He wanted to be love, and therefore He is love. And therefore Satan is the thought of selfishness, and he cast it into creation. He cast it into your head. And you have a free will choice to choose selfishness or love. The choice you make is the one you have. He's not expecting perfection. I mean, I'm going to be just outright honest here, friend, because people aren't thinking about this. In the beginning, for my Father, since He knew the end in the beginning, that means He knew what Satan was going to do and what we were going to do from the beginning. So before He created Satan, He knew Satan's fall. Before He put the fruit in the garden, He knew Adam and Eve were going to eat it. Before He created Adam and Eve, He knew that Adam and Eve were going to eat it, right? Because my Father knew the end in the beginning. Because my Father doesn't exist within time. He exists outside of time. You'll never comprehend what it is I'm saying. Probably, it doesn't matter. But I have to tell you the truth. So understand that my Father did have to create a little bit of a selfish act. And that is, which makes Him divine. Which makes Him the fruit of two vines. Because in the beginning there was only God. And He was in complete and utter isolation. If He did not create children, He would have been alone forever. He would have never known Himself by experience. He could have said He was love, but He would not have been love because there was nothing to love. He could say He loved Himself, but it would have had no meaning because there was no experience. So He created a divine plan, an ingenious plan, because He wanted to be love. He created a thought or a spirit, I don't care what you call it, that is not yet is. And it's a thought of selfishness. It's a thought of Satan. And He created it, and then He cast it into creation. I don't care the way you understand the book stories that it tells in the Bible. It doesn't matter whether you understand its accuracy. What I understand that in the end, it's cast into creation, right? My Father threw it out of His kingdom. However, it has rights to enter the throne room when my Father needs it to, right? That's how Jesus is breaking the seal. So understand, the prodigal son gives not only his thought of Christ to Christ, but he also gives his thought of Satan. So the prodigal son gets played like a puppet on a string. He's doing a dance because Christ commands him. Because the prodigal son doesn't know what to do or what to say or how to say it or how to do it. He lets Christ do everything for him, and he'll speak against the church even though he doesn't want to. Because understand that Jesus and Judas created Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur was an altar goat and a wilderness goat. And Jesus was the altar goat and Judas was the wilderness goat. In traditional Jewish history of Yom Kippur, they killed the altar goat and they collect the blood of it and they pour it on the altar goat, which is pouring the blood, pouring the sins of the nation onto the wilderness goat, right? So they pin the sins of the nation onto the wilderness goat, and then they used to cast it into the wilderness. And if it got near civilization, they'd throw rocks at it, right? And it had to stay out in the wilderness to keep their sins out of Israel. Now later on, because it got so populated, they started throwing it off a cliff, but that's not the way originally Yom Kippur started. That's why it's called the wilderness goat. It wasn't a cliff goat, it was a wilderness goat. So it was pushed out into the wilderness and left there to bear their sins until it died on its own. So that's what a wilderness goat is. So that was Judas, except for Judas got killed, right? So Job, if you notice, didn't get killed, but Judas did. Just give me a second, you'll understand this. Okay, so Jesus took, at the Last Supper, Jesus took his bread, which was his body, and he dipped it in his wine, which was his blood, and he handed it to Judas. And when he handed it to Judas, it said that Satan entered into him because Satan wasn't in him to begin with. And then Judas said, "Not me, Lord." And Jesus said, "Go do what you must do." He cast him from the lot. He cast him into the wilderness. Judas is your wilderness goat. And he once again comes to betray Christ. Just as Christ made him betray him then, he's making him betray his body again. And this time, because the church did not do what Jesus asked, they judged the nation and the entire world, but they will not judge themselves. And so therefore they have become very filthy, and they're judging everyone else for their sins, yet they won't even ask for forgiveness of their own. And you might be the exceptional Christian, friend, but if you look, you can see priests getting caught molesting children. You've got preachers driving around in private jets. Some of them own multiple jets, friend. Multiple private jets. You realize that's the money they collected to feed the hungry and clothe the naked. Jesus told you don't do that. He said, do not build bigger barns to store more wheat. Do not build bigger bank accounts to store more money. All these parables Jesus gave you were for a reason. He told you the absolute truth, top to bottom, friend. So Judas is coming to judge the church, and that is the first rider of Revelation. He is the prodigal son, and he does ride a white horse, and he wears a crown, and he carries a bow, but he has no arrows, because by the time you see Judas, he'll have already launched all his arrows, friend. Satan can't stop him because he's already slayed Goliath. Goliath just hasn't fallen yet. He came to drag Satan back into hell. The thought of Satan is a publicly traded corporation. You are letting your children get murdered by these things. My Father's not going to allow it. So that's the reason the rider was released, because we let them turn this nation and this world into selfishness. And therefore, my Father, through the Son, releases the rider. And therefore, my Father won't judge his children, but because this is Christ's kingdom, and Christ has the right to judge the church, he does do so, and he does it with Judas. So he comes and judges you. But if you remember, at the Last Supper, Jesus said, I came to save you, not judge you. But another is going to come at the end of the age and judge you with my words. So he told you this messenger was going to come and tell you what Christ meant and condemn you with the words of Christ, right? So it doesn't matter whether you kill the rider or not, friend. It doesn't matter. If you plant his seed, you're going to create a crop. It does not matter. It's irrelevant. His arrows were already launched. That's what you need to understand. And understand that there is no third scapegoat to put the blame on for killing the Son. Notice that Jesus blamed his death on Judas, right? Even though he's the one who made Judas kill him, he pinned all the debt on Judas. He didn't blame the Pharisees, and he didn't blame Caesar. He didn't blame Pilate. the governor of Judea. And so the thing here is that my father created a loophole in his law. Just like Job, Satan was not allowed to kill Job, right? He said, you can test him, but you can't kill him, because that's against the law, because Job didn't do anything to warrant it, because he was righteous, right? So part of that Job story is to help you understand the Judas story. So understand that this is all going down a certain way. So Judas paid a debt that he didn't know, because Satan entered into him and made him do what he did, just like Job had to get tested, right? So Judas got tested and failed. However, Judas was supposed to fail because that was Christ's intent, was to make him betray him so that he could pin everything on Judas so that he didn't have to blame anyone else. And then he was cast into hell and therefore paid the debt for everyone. I don't know whether you're getting this or not. Christianity doesn't understand what was all going on there. So now the wilderness goat has a loophole in the law where he can make a judgment without being held accountable for it, because his father allowed the firstborn to put Satan into Judas and made Judas betray him so that he didn't have to hold the Jews accountable. Jesus came to save the Jews from extinction. Most of y'all aren't going to know that, but it's true. If you go look, it said that at the time of Jesus that more troops were entering into Israel. And it said that Barabbas, right? Barabbas, the other one who was in prison for killing in an uprising. So if you notice at the right there at his judgment and crucifixion and all that, it said that Pilate and Herod became friends. It said that the Pharisees and the crowd yelled, "We have no king but Caesar." So he healed a divide that was going to get them all murdered. And my father could not let them get murdered because he has a promise to Abraham to keep, that his descendants will inherit the kingdom, right? So therefore, he had to save them from extinction, because otherwise the bloodline of Abraham would have been lost and my father's promise would have been broken. So Christ came to heal the divide, because he told you that they weren't going to accept him, right? He said that about you don't put new wine in an old wineskin, lest the wineskin burst and both are ruined. And then he said you don't put a new patch on old clothing, otherwise it'll tear and make the tear worse than before when the patch shrinks and pulls away. So understand, all that was, he was telling you that the Jews were not going to receive him, nor were they supposed to receive him. So if you go look in the Bible, you will see that what I was telling you about Jesus coming to save them from extinction, you will see it, but he doesn't say it specifically, because it was not to be known until the end of the age. Because my father kept it concealed until the wilderness goat arrives, right? So understand that the Jews will not convert because they did not get Yom Kippur. They didn't know they got Yom Kippur. So until they realized that the wilderness goat was Judas, and that Jesus was the altar goat, not just the Passover lamb, because he came to represent the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. So he was both at the same time, because he came to represent both, right? Meaning represent my Father. So you're going to see that now that I tell it to you, if you go look at the ritual of Yom Kippur, and then you go look at what happened with Jesus. Then when you go look, you'll see about the soldiers entering into Rome, and you will know that Rome also used to murder off entire tribes if they were not fruitful limbs in the vine of Rome. Just like Jesus said that he was the vine and you were the branches. Well, Rome was a vine and Israel was a branch. And because they were a dead branch, meaning they were costing more than what they were worth, Rome was going to kill them off. And that would have ruined my father's promise to Abraham, which he will not break, because Abraham was willing to sacrifice his firstborn son. So my father then was willing to sacrifice his firstborn son. So understand, everything that goes on in that Bible is about a promise to Abraham. Christians have no special rights that they think they have. They just don't. And Jesus told you that. So this whole thing is about a promise to Abraham. And he promised Abraham's descendants that they would inherit the kingdom. He did not promise Christians that they would inherit the kingdom. So understand, he told you that you had to become willing to die in order to live. He said a lot of things that people aren't listening to, friend. They've called him a liar about just about everything he said. So I'm hoping that because you hear me, you will go get a red letter edition of the Bible and read what Jesus said and read. Believe what he said is true, because I'm telling you things that you won't know, because these secrets that I'm giving you, my Father gave me through the Son, through the Holy Spirit, right? It doesn't matter, because what's going on, Jesus said that the Father says it to him, he says it to the Holy Spirit says it to us. The Holy Spirit is the voice of the Father. The clue there is that the Son is keeping the Father blameless, because there's a judgment that has to be made. The Son's going to do it so the Father doesn't have to, because my Father created all this for the love of it, and we refuse to do what he asked. And free will requires that he allows us to do it. The thought of Satan, if you're going to abide in it and worship it, which is the thought of selfishness, then you have to pay the price. You have to pay Satan's due. And if that's what you want to pay, well, then you will pay it, friend. But if you don't want to pay it, you don't have to, because Christ did die so that you may live. But if you believe that he was your king, then you listen to what he said. And Jesus said that if you know me, you know my Father. And because you get to know my Father, you'll really know me. So if you did not get to know the Son, you didn't get to know the Father. And because you didn't get to know the Father, you still don't know the Son. And all the things that I'm telling you are going to sound completely bizarre and strange to you, because you never studied Jesus. You listened to the Pharisees, you went and memorized a couple statements Jesus made to go along with their fairy tale stories of how it is my Father is in a box. Do you get that? My Father, you can't put my Father in a box. We are in the box of the Father, right? He is in us and we're in him. If my Father ever left, all of creation would go with him. I can't tell you what I know, because it wouldn't make any sense to you. Jesus told you, he said, what can I tell you of the kingdom if you can't even understand these simple things? So if you didn't even study Christ because you believed that he was the Father's Son and he was the Word made flesh, if you didn't get down with him intimately, then you don't even know that the statements that I've made that he said are true, because the church never talks about these statements, friend. You will never hear them say that ye are God's, and because it was written into Scripture, it can't be undone. Yet Jesus said it, and I'm telling you so. So go buy a red letter edition of the Bible. What he said was that he was the Son that the Father set apart for himself, meaning that he delivered him a specific way at a specific time for a specific reason. He had to honor Abraham, and therefore he gave Abraham his firstborn son. He sacrificed him so that his descendants would not die, right? So he did what Abraham did. Understand that. So Christianity needs to get over themselves and realize that you are my Father's child, but so is every person on this planet. And if you're going to let one of them starve while you glorify yourself, then you've made the choice, not my Father, because he told you that. Jesus laid this all out. He said, do not store up treasure here, store it up in the kingdom. Well, the only way to give my Father a gift is to give it to your neighbor, right? Because you can't give my Father anything. He already owns it all. Jesus said the landlord's coming for the rent. And when he comes for the rent, you're going to pay the due. So if you haven't repented and made a new choice, then you're going to owe the debt that you owe because you made the wrong choice. And Jesus told you all this, friend. I'm just not telling you any lies here. I'm just telling you what Jesus said. So I'm really hoping you're going to go read what Jesus said. Because here's truth, friend. I love you. I might not know you, but I know that you're my Father's son. And the only way for me to love all of him is to love all of you. The only thing I can give to my Father is my love and my thoughts, right? I worship him in spirit and in truth. I adore him in thought and love. Worship is to give adoration to a deity. So I adore him, right? In spirit means not body, so he's of thought, and therefore I worship him in thought. I adore him in thought. And truth is love, and love is truth. So therefore I adore him in thought and love. So I love him because he created us for this purpose, so that he may know love by experience. Just like the reason you had your children was so that you could know love by experience. Unless you had them for some other reason that wasn't worthy, well then you wouldn't have a clue on what I'm talking about. But if you wanted to love your children, understand my Father wants to love his. But if your children are going to bash each other and murder each other, you're not going to tolerate it, so why should my Father? I'm hoping you're getting this, because it's all written, friend. But Jesus told you, I'm going to utter secrets that have been hidden since the beginning of the world, the foundation of the world. And he did. And I am now uttering secrets to you that he uttered to me. You could see them if you go look, but the church will tell you I'm telling lies, and I really don't care, friend, because I'm not here to be worshipped. The firstborn came so that you may know the truth of my Father. So if you know him, you know my Father. And because you know him and my Father, then you'll know me, because you'll hear my words and know that what I said, he said first. Not that I'm anything special, because I'm not the firstborn. I'm just a prodigal son like everybody else, right? Jesus told you that those that owed the most would love him the most. Friend, I owed him all kinds of debt. He had to drag me, he had to loose my chains and set me free. He dragged me up out of hell. But hell is not there, friend. If you go look, the word he kept using was Gehenna, which is a state or place of mental suffering, right? So I was in a state or place of mental suffering, and he set me free because I received the Holy Spirit. But it came at a steep price. I did make him an offer because I was so upset. I told him, I said, I don't care if you whip, beat, and crucify me. You give me the truth or you kill me now. And a death showed up in my mind, and a voice showed up and said, would you agree? And so I agreed, and he started telling me the truth about what Jesus said. So now I can't save my life. I have to give it to him to do with it as he will. Now that doesn't mean I have to suffer the death that he showed me. That's up to him. But I have to be willing. Jesus didn't want to go to the cross, friend. He was only willing. You know, the night before there, he wept and said, Father, don't make me drink from this cup, but nonetheless your will be done. So he had to be willing to die. He didn't have to want to die. Nobody wants to die. So that's not what this is about. So it's about giving your thoughts to God, coming to know love by experience, and making a new choice and bringing my Father's kingdom. And you bring my Father's kingdom by doing what Jesus asked. You feed the hungry, you clothe the naked, and you visit those that are sick and in prison. And when you do that, the kingdom starts coming to you and to those that you're bringing it to. Now, whether they choose to accept it or not doesn't matter, right? But see, if you try to go out and preach to people that don't want to know Jesus, you're wasting your time. And he told you not to cast your pearls before swine, right? Meaning that they'll turn around and tear you to pieces, meaning they don't want to listen to your religious hypocrisy because they've been watching the church do all the stuff it's doing. So he said, go out and take care of those that really are looking for a new way of life. Those that are right now hungry, naked, in prison, they're the people that have a clue that their life isn't the way they want it to be. And so if you offer them a better life through Christ, they're much more likely to take it, just like I did. And then because you give it to them, they have it. And then instead of taking the credit, you give all the credit to my Father and to the firstborn son. And then because you give it all to them, they'll give it back to you, and then you give it back to the others, right? And then as long as you're not taking the credit, your thought of Satan, which is your thought of selfishness and pride, won't be able to get a hold of you because you're not taking credit for it. Because your thought of Satan, which is your thought of selfishness, would love to blow you up, because it used to like to blow me up like a tick just so that it could pop me, friend. I've fallen off the mountain of pride 100,000 times over. I'm not lying to you about that. This isn't some wisdom I got. My Father put me through hell so that I could tell you how to get out. So I'm right now offering you the keys to the kingdom, friend. I'm hoping you choose to take them because it's a free will choice. If you want out of hell, if you're in suffering, Jesus said He came for those in need of a doctor. I'm here to tell you that He's the greatest psychiatrist ever born. And you don't need a pill to get fixed. You're suffering from guilt and fear because you don't have faith in my Father. And He will give you something that you just can't even fathom. And friend, you don't have to believe me, but if you go do the things Jesus asked, it'll become clear to you, but it takes time. It starts off as a mustard seed, the smallest of seeds. But if you do the things He asked, and you really study and you really do the things He asked, you will become a mustard tree. And you will give shade and rest to other people, right? And therefore, because you were fruitful, He will prune you and make you even more fruitful, right? So this was all truth given through Christ. But if you didn't study it, if you didn't try to figure out the parables, then you don't have a clue on what I'm talking about. If you went and listened to men that got degrees from men, they're still trying to teach you stuff that they were getting taught in the Dark Ages, friend, which was from the Pope, which has nothing to do with what Christ said. I'm going to give you another clue. They told you to call your priests Father. Jesus said, call no man Father but your Father in heaven. Why is it the church would ask you to do what Jesus told you not to? I hope you're going to think about these things, friend. Because if you're not, you're going to buy into their hypocrisy and their lies, and you're going to be caught holding the bag at the end of the age, and you're going to end up owing all that's due. So, because they're telling you to pray to saints. Friend, Jesus said, no idols. No idols. No saint idols, no nothing idols, friend. Jesus came to represent the thought of God so He could lead you to the Father. And then because you got to know the Son, you'd get to know the Father, and then you would love the Father and therefore love the Son. But if you say, love Jesus and fear God, you got it backwards. It's actually love God and fear Jesus, because Jesus is the one who's going to break the seal and make you pay your debt. So I hope you're getting that, because Jesus has to do what Jesus has to do. There's far more going on than I can just explain to you. It won't even make sense to you, friend. The things that I know, I can't even make sense of some of it. Sometimes He gives me downloads of things that are absolutely clear, and then it disappears again. So there's a whole lot more that I know that I can't really tell you because it won't make sense to you. And sometimes I lose sense of it myself because I'm not that smart, friend. I'm a flesh body. And He gave me a brain that is not, I don't have a high IQ. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, friend. My Father gives me all this. And then He takes it away again. The Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away, right? But He giveth to me, and I give it to you. Then He take it away, and then I don't need it anymore until He gives it again, right? So I don't have to know everything. That's the thing. If you're in relationship with my Father, you just don't even need to be smart, friend. All right, well, just know that I love you because my Father loves you, and may God bless you and yours.